Since the introduction of the 4R34 automatic GMT movement, Seiko have been pumping out model after model, and who can blame them? At this point, there are more than 15 to choose from with that movement. But I think the one we have today might just be the best. Welcome to Addicted to Watches. Today, we're looking at a watch from Seiko's 5KX GMTs, the line that Seiko used to launch their 4R34 movement. At the time of making this video, there are plenty of choices when it comes to colour. Some very conservative, some a bit more out there. I think this one here strikes the perfect balance between the two. This is the Seiko 5 SSK021. On release in late 2023, this, along with two other colours, were released as US exclusive models. They came with a retail price of $475, which was the same as the original blue, black and orange colours released. So, there was no premium for the exclusive colourways. It was a move that some questioned at the time though, as they didn't seem to have any rhyme or reason for limiting the watches to the US market. I don't know whether Seiko quietly changed their mind, or if other factors are at play, but that is not really the case these days. I can find this model available in-store in Seiko boutiques here in Australia, admittedly for an eye-watering $895 Australian dollar price tag, and the one I have in my hands here actually came from Japan. Whatever the case, this watch is now much more readily available in other markets, which can only be a good thing. Not least because, in my opinion, this is the best colourway that Seiko have released this watch in. The design of the watch as a whole is one that everyone by this point should be very familiar with. It is of course based on the cult classic SKX007 and 009 platform that was discontinued by Seiko and reincarnated in their new 5 collection. If you watched an earlier video I did about the SBSC003, the JDM version of the SSK003, you'll know that this is actually my first proper experience with a watch based on the SKX format. The reason I chose to sell that blue version and go with this as my first simply comes down to colour. So, let's take a closer look. Starting, as I always do, at the dial, we're presented with a spectacular sunburst grey dial. It's a dial colour I've always had a soft spot for ever since my SNX S079. Since then, I've had the grey Dress KX, grey Tic Tac, and I'm always on the lookout for the next. It's a grey that leans on the slightly warmer side of things than cooler, which complements the gold tone we'll see in a little while. The sunburst is pronounced, changing dramatically from a darker charcoal grey colour to light silver, but still manages to stay understated and not be too eye-catching, which is no mean feat. It's got applied hour markers with polished frames in classic SKX style. Rounded triangle at 12, ovals at 6 and 9, and circular indices everywhere else. They are of course filled with lume, and glow just how you'd expect for a Seiko dive style watch. At 3, there is no marker, and instead Seiko have graced us with a date complication. Nothing unusual about that, but it's the Cyclops sitting atop it that is a bit more polarizing. Love it or hate it, it does a decent enough job magnifying the white date wheel within, and gets it up to a size that visually balances it well opposite the applied 9 o'clock marker. Also applied above the pinion is the Seiko logo, while the 5 Superman S is just printed in white underneath. Moving below the pinion, we have the classic automatic in cursive script, also in white, but beneath that we see our first pop of gold in the form of GMT, which ties in with everything else. The second pop of gold can be found on the GMT hand, which makes its way around the dial once per 24 hours. It is pretty simple, just having a loomed arrow tip, but if you ask me, it doesn't need to stand out any more than it does. The other hands are your typical SKX handset. All have received lume, including the lollipop counterbalance to the second hand, which has been painted half in white and half in black. The use of gold for the GMT hand not only helps it differentiate itself from the main hands, but also ties in with the other gold elements on the watch. All of the hands as well as the hour markers have been filled with lume, and, as you'd expect for a Seiko, they glow pretty well. Since it's only a dive style watch as opposed to a diver's watch, the bezel has no lume unfortunately, but realistically, how many people would be diving with this anyway? For realistic, practical purposes, like reading the time after dark, everything glows more than brightly enough in the green glow that Seiko's LumiBright gives off. Surrounding the dial is an angled chapter ring that is printed with a GMT scale, and on each marker, every second hour is printed, 2 through 24, which lets you track a second time zone in combination with the GMT hand. It's color matched reasonably well, but is probably a shade darker than the main dial in most lights. Matching a sunburst dial is next to impossible when it's always changing shades, so I'm fine with it. On top of all that, and providing a resting place for that Cyclops magnifier, is of course the crystal. It's just Hardlex, which is hardly surprising given the fact that it's a Seiko 5. It's flat aside from that Cyclops, but does also have a bevel around the outer edge, which often refracts the light and creates some interesting effects by giving you a glimpse of the hour markers. Taking a step back and looking at the measurements of the watch, it should all be pretty familiar. This watch has a case size of 42.5mm across the case. It might sound a little on the larger side, but we all know it wears much better than that, thanks in no small part to the lug-to-lug, which is just 46mm. Seiko really know how to design a big case that wears well. Height, not including the Cyclops, is 13.6mm, which is pretty much on par for a GMT style watch. Lug width is 22mm, so replacement straps should be no trouble at all to find if you want to mix things up. Aside from the dial, or maybe even more so, the most striking feature of this watch is that bezel. That's both the bezel insert and the bezel itself. Starting with the bezel, it's our final and most prominent pop of gold, which ties the GMT hand and printing together. It's friction fit and can be turned both ways, as distinct from a dive time bezel that generally clicks in one direction only. It's probably not quite enough to be called two-tone, but even if it is, it's got some subtlety to it. Going overboard with too much gold on the watch would have been very easy for Seiko to do here, but I'm really glad they showed some restraint. The bezel insert is not going to let the bezel itself get all the attention, however. It's a bicolor split insert with GMT markings that let you track a third time zone if you really want to. The top half is black, whereas the bottom half is a grey-silver color to match the dial. However, this bottom half has an almost mirror finish that can look white, black, or any other color depending on the light that it's reflecting. On paper, it sounds like a bad idea, but in operation it looks fantastic. The insert itself is a mineral insert rather than aluminium or ceramic, and has a glossy finish to it. The case itself is your typical SKX case. Smooth, sweeping curves, round edges, a brushed top and polished sides. From the side we can see just how short the lug-to-lug really is, and, even though it looks quite thick from this angle, does wear well. The lugs have been drilled to make changing out the strap nice and easy too. A protected but unsigned crown at 4 unfortunately doesn't screw down and only provides the watch with 100 meters of water resistance, a notable downgrade from the original SKX. Having the crown down here, while not unique to Seiko, has become fairly synonymous with their dive watches. Sumos, Turtles, Marine Masters, and many other models all have their crowns down here. Turning the watch all the way around, we get a look at a display caseback revealing the movement within. This is a budget watch, and could easily be a gateway watch for new enthusiasts, so having a display caseback will add fuel to that fire. It does screw down and has some specs printed around the perimeter. A definite upgrade over the original SKX is the bracelet. Where the original had a light, flimsy, hollow-feeling bracelet, this one is much more solid, complete with solid end links. It's a Jubilee style, with brushed outer links and polished inner ones. It's just as comfortable as you'd expect, with short links conforming to the wrist. It's also got a very nice taper from 22 at the case to 18mm by the time it reaches the clasp. Some people will complain about the clasp, but I don't really mind it. Sure, it's got a pressed outer and inner, but that keeps it pretty slim overall, and it still feels perfectly secure. It also features the brand logo engraved in the security foldover, and offers 4 positions for micro adjustment to get a good fit. In keeping with the rest of the bracelet, it's also brushed on top and polished on the sides. When on wrist, it's slim and really keeps out of the way, which I appreciate. Since we're already talking about it, let's get it on wrist and see how it wears. For a 42.5mm case, I think it wears really well on my 7-inch wrist. It's a case that is very accommodating for larger and smaller wrists, and part of the reason it's as popular as it is. Turning my wrist here, there's a lot of light play. The sunburst dial, gold GMT hand, gold bezel, silver bezel insert, polished links on the bracelet. It all sounds like everything would be competing for your eye and your attention, but it all just works so well together. Aside from those gold elements, the watch is basically monochrome grey, which really helps with the cohesion. The bracelet as well is very comfortable, and though there is no real reason to change it out, if you wanted to, you could throw it on something like this sailcloth strap to maintain the ability to take it into the water while also dressing it up a little. This one comes from Artem straps and looks pretty good on the watch. Matching greys can be tricky, but this leather one does a pretty good job of it, since it is a warmer tone of grey, and it doesn't look bad at all. If you want a more classic dive watch look, you could pair the watch with this black tropic strap. This combo in particular is very comfortable and ties in with the top half of that bezel insert. And of course, a watch like this works well on a range of nylon straps as well. It's a bit of an odd combination, but I really like the way the accent line on this strap picks out the gold on the watch, even if the blue doesn't quite match. Now that we've covered the watch, what do I have to say about my first SKX experience? Has my life changed and I view the world differently? Do I regret not getting one sooner before the original was discontinued? Well, no, to be honest. It's a nice watch and I do like it. In fact, I like this colorway the best out of all of them. So, I'm actually pretty glad I waited for this one to come along before dipping my toes into this design. If you ask me, this is the best out of all the available colors for both the GMT and non-GMT versions. It balances all of the individual design colors and elements in a way that just works so well. A small pop of gold is something I have always really liked. It's present in the form of a gold second hand on my Grand Seikos, and when it's not too overdone, a little bit of gold goes a long way in a design like this. What do you think about this watch? Is there a better colorway than this? Are the 007 and 009 the only true options worth considering? Should I have picked one of the other 5 GMTs like the Field Watch version? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.